The Gilded Age is produced by Universal Television and brought to you by HBO of Warner Media. All characters, plot points, and footage are property of HBO. The Gilded Age is a brand new drama airing exclusively on HBO Max. Join your friends at Free Tours by Foot as we take you through New York City, showing you actual locations from the show, locations in New York City the show is based around, discuss plot points, and go over the actual history of all of the events of the Gilded Age. And remember to book your tour with freetoursbyfoot.com the next time you visit New York City or any one of our other locations. And now, on to Katherine.
Hey everyone, we're back, and it finally came. The Gilded Age finale episode aired just this week. And if you've been watching some of these videos, we definitely called some of those storylines based on the history of the actual Gilded Age. I was very excited personally that we did get to see Gladys's coming out ball finally. But what they did with that storyline and what they showed with Mrs. Russell sort of strong-arming Caroline Astor, this really formidable woman, into caving and breaking basically every personal rule she had and showing up at this ball. This is directly pulled from the Alva Vanderbilt playbook. We were talking about Alva Vanderbilt's masquerade ball back in one of our first couple videos actually, and saying we thought this was maybe one of the storylines and one of the tools that they were going to use for Bertha Russell, and they ended up doing just that. Now, in reality, a couple of things would have been different. Alva Vanderbilt's ball was not a coming out ball. It was a housewarming ball right after she had finished her house. And Carrie Astor was supposed to do a quadrille like we talked about and didn't receive an invitation because her mother had never formally called on Alva Vanderbilt. The part that was expanded for the sake of the story in the Gilded Age was the piece about Mrs. Astor having to kind of pressure all of these other old money families into coming.
If you consider yourselves to be my friends, you will attend Mrs. Russell's ball this evening.
Really?
Don't you dare sound cheerful.
To my knowledge, that was not part of it. Mrs. Astor herself did show up. But the other difference with the ball would have been not just that this was a coming out ball. Mrs. Vanderbilt's ball was actually much, much bigger. It was said to have had about 1,200 guests. So what we were seeing at the Russells, well, obviously very, very lavish, not 1,200 guests, much, much smaller than that. But we did finally get to see this storyline play out, and it does seem like, you know, with Mrs. Astor coming into the Russell house, that Mrs. Russell has kind of done it.
Astor, how good of you to come. How kind you are to receive me, Mrs. Russell.
She's done what she set out to do, and she's cracked that upper echelon of New York high society. Now, what I think might be coming next is another big story of a kind of a final showdown between Alva Vanderbilt and Mrs. Caroline Astor. And I'm wondering if they are going to do this in the second season, because they've been teasing it a little bit throughout the first season. Every time we see them at the opera, they're at the Academy of Music. We've now seen the Academy of Music multiple times, but they keep mentioning that the new people might break off and start their own opera company, the Metropolitan Opera Company, and they did. And Alva Vanderbilt was a very big part of that. And they have mentioned it a few times, so I wouldn't be surprised if in season 2 we see the opening of the Metropolitan Opera. And if you remember back to what we talked about, what made the Metropolitan Opera different than the old Academy of Music was the number of boxes. The old Academy of Music only had 18 boxes, and so it was very, very restricted to only those old Knickerbocker families who could get a box. Now the Metropolitan Opera House had over 100 boxes. And this is where I want to point out something Ward McAllister says to Mrs. Astor when he's trying to get her to cave and go to Mrs. Russell's ball. And this is really based on certainly conversations and things that Ward McAllister, the real Ward McAllister, did say, which was, you know, we have to let some of these new money people in. We can't just keep barring the door, because if we do, they're just going to go and start their own society, and we will be the ones that are edged out.
Cannot hope to keep out the new people entirely, or they'd form their own society that would exclude us. You know this.
Yes.
And he was really one of the people in that time period that was kind of trying to straddle the line between the old money and the new money, trying to be the go-between, because he could see the way the wind was blowing. These new money people weren't going anywhere, and they had a lot of money, and they wanted to be a part of things. And so really, yeah, the old Knickerbocker families did need to let some of them come and play, because that was how they were going to be able to stay included. I think the fictional character in the Gilded Age that best embodies this is Aurora Fane. You see some of that with her character as well. Yes, she's old money, but she doesn't really seem to have as much of a problem going and socializing with these new money families, because she, I think, also sees this might be the future. So I think we could see some of that play out with the next season, with a story about the Metropolitan Opera House. And the Metropolitan Opera House was really done by the new money families, but because it had so many boxes, they weren't edging out the old families. They were saying, hey, we have room for all of us. We can all have a box. And that did become the preeminent opera house in New York City, not just because of the number of boxes, but truly because it had vastly superior acoustics to the old Academy of Music. And it is an opera house that is kind of important. And so that's what I think we're going to continue to see more of in season 2 of the Gilded Age, is you're going to start to see this shift of, yeah, you're always going to have the people, the old money families that have that mentality, like Mrs. Van Ryn, like Mrs. Astor, of no, keep them out at all costs. But even they start to crack. Even they start to cave a little bit. And the tides do start turning. Society breaks open a little bit as we get further into the Gilded Age. You have to remember, even Mrs. Caroline Astor finally moves uptown from her stately brownstone at 34th and builds a giant marble palace on the Upper East Side. Even she does it. Even she has a ballroom eventually that can hold over 1,000 people. So they do start to bend a little bit in some of these ideas. And so I think we're going to continue to see more of that. And I think you already see the beginnings of it as well, particularly in the storylines of the younger generation, because you can see that the younger generation doesn't seem to think the same way their parents do. Oscar Van Ryn has no problem with the idea of marrying Gladys Russell, a girl from a new money family.
Come and dance with me.
But I have to change my dress.
We can do that later. Dance with me, and I'll leave you alone for the rest of the evening.
Carrie Astor historically did marry a man from a new money family. So this will start to happen more and more as you get further into the era, and I think we're going to see that continue to play out. Carrie Astor historically got married in 1884, so depending on how far in to the next couple of years season 2 goes, we might very well see Carrie Astor's marriage to somebody her mother did not really approve of. But as you saw with the situation with the ball in the Gilded Age, in the finale, Mrs. Caroline Astor certainly didn't have much of a soft side, but she did deeply care for her daughter, and she did make that concession for her daughter. So ultimately her daughter did get her way. She did marry this man from this new money family. So we have seen that, as we all predicted, Mr. Rakes did not turn out to be this knight in shining armor for poor Marion Brooke.
Had you decided to break your word? Did you know when we met in the park?
No. And I meant it when I said I love you.
Their elopement did not go through. He decided he needed to marry a girl with some means and some wealth. But I think they've maybe planted just the very, very beginnings of seeds for maybe seeing a relationship between Marion Brooke and Larry Russell. We might see that play out.
You promised me a waltz. I saw you talking to Mr. Rakes.
Oh, yes, he's just someone I used to know. Let's dance.
In season 2, we have already given you our theories now that Gladys is out, that her storyline will end up following that of Consuelo Vanderbilt, and unfortunately for poor Gladys, we may see her married off to a titled European aristocrat in the next season as one of the Gilded Age's dollar princesses. So we might be seeing some of that in season 2. We'll continue to see changes probably with George Russell's business as the railroads continue to grow and expand. And I'm particularly interested to see where Peggy's storyline is going to go next, because right at the end of this finale episode, you've seen that she and her mother are going together to Philadelphia. They're going to try to find her child, who is not dead, contrary to what Peggy has thought for all of this time.
You've no proof.
You don't know what we have.
We have proof the boy didn't die. We believe he was adopted, and you knew.
If you're expecting me to say I'm sorry.
We'd never be so foolish as to expect that.
And so I'll be interested to see what that means for Peggy's storyline in season 2, because in this time period, historically, society was not very kind to single mothers, and that would be essentially what Peggy would become, because you have to remember her father annulled her marriage. So we'll have to see how this plays out. Do they find her child? If they do, does that affect Peggy's prospects for her newspaper career? Does she continue to work at the Globe? And how is her story going to continue to unfold? I think we have a lot of exciting things coming up. We'll certainly be looking forward to season 2, but we're so glad you joined us throughout season 1, talking about the history of the Gilded Age, and we'll be waiting for what's next.
So Mrs. Russell won the battle after all.
I'm not so sure it's over yet.
You wish you'd been invited?
Oh, I suppose. What about you?
Maybe we will be one day. After all, this is America.